So today we are going to start with this module named SQL. So there was a scientist working with IBM. His name was Mr. Cod, and he published a paper named Relational Database Systems. So he proposed the idea of relational databases. Now his idea was basically that let's create a system where we place the data in a centralized system and let everyone access it through a network. That was his idea. And he wrote a paper on this. Now, Oracle was the first company who picked up this paper and started implementing it, started creating the system. So they created a system and they named them as RDBMS. RDBMS stands for Relational Database Management System. And relational database management system was basically the base of all the modern database system that we deal with. But this ideation was done by the IBM scientist, Mr. E.F. Cod, and he wrote a paper named Relational Database System, which was picked up by Oracle, and they implemented this actual system, RDBMS. Now, what is RDBMS? RDBMS comes with two major components. One is your client, another one is your server. Now, what was server and what was client? पहले server समझते हैं. What is server? A server is basically a centralized place where multiple computers are connected together in a series to form a huge processing power and storage capability. So let's say this is a server and this is a huge building, and in this huge building there are multiple computers connected together, and all these forms what is known as a data center. In this data center you get huge availability of processing power and storage at the same time. So in this data center, since multiple computers are connected in series, it forms a huge availability of processing power and storage at the same time. Now, definitely, companies such as Google, companies such as Microsoft, companies such as Amazon, they all can establish their own data center. But companies such as Zomato, companies such as a small company, they would not be able to afford this much infrastructure cost, right? So what they do, they rent. So let's say Zomato has rented a small space in this data center. इसने इस स्पेस को रेंट पे ले लिया. So they decided, Zomato decided that I will pay something to Google in exchange of this space in their data center. So now this space is basically taken or basically managed or used by Zomato. This space is known as the data warehouse for Zomato. Data warehouse for Zomato. And Zomato has rented this from Google. Rented from Google. Now, I hope you guys know that Zomato has so many companies that they are running together, right? So Zomato has a parent company named Eternal, and Eternal has Zomato in it, Blinkit in it, District in it, Hyperpure in it. So what Zomato will do, in this particular space that they have purchased or rented from Zomato, they will create subfolders inside this. They will create some folders inside this. First folder they will create. So basically, it is like bifurcating the entire space that they have rented into smaller spaces. So they have bifurcated this into 4 smaller spaces. So let's say this is given to Zomato. So all the data related to Zomato, they will preserve it over here. They gave this to Blinkit. They gave this to Hyperpure, and they give this to District. And now they will use these folders to create what is known as a table. But these folders in the language of RDBMS are known as the database. Databases. So we have multiple databases now. Each database will have multiple tables into it. Multiple tables into it. So let's say I have one table as the orders table. So we will have the order ID. We will have the customer ID. We will have the restaurant ID. We will have item ID. Then we will have delivery partner ID. Then total amount. Then coupon used, and so on. So this is one table. Now they will have more tables such like this. So let's say another table is of customers. So they have customer ID, they have customer name, customer email, customer phone number, and so on. Let's say they have another ID about restaurants. Restaurant ID, restaurant name, owner name, and so on. So here now, how many tables I have created? I have created 3 tables, but like this, there will be multiple tables. Let's say this is your orders table. This is your customers table. And this is your restaurants table. And all these tables can be assumed of a Excel file or a sheet. But can you see that there is a kind of a relationship that can exist between all these tables, right? Yes or no, everyone? Can you see some kind of relationship that exists between these tables? I can create a relationship between this and this table using this customer ID. I can create a relationship between this and this restaurant and order using restaurant ID. And these are known as your relations. Relations. So this particular infrastructure is known as relational database management system. Why relational? Because every table that is a part of the database has a relation that connects one table from the other. And you need to define that when you create the table. So there is a connection between one table to another table, that is the relational. Now, since these tables are the part of the database, so relational database, and since this is a system which is managing all these database, it is known as relational database management system. So now just think about it. This particular data center is not running on my computer. This is running somewhere in a location, and it is a humongous location. बहुत बड़ी जगह है ये. In this humongous location, there are multiple computers which are connected together. And now, as a company, Zomato, I have rented a small space in this particular data center, which is a data warehouse for me. And in this data warehouse, I have created multiple subfolders and called it as a database. I assigned a folder for my company Zomato. I assigned a folder for my company Blinkit and so on. And each of this database can now hold my data for that company. So now I have a Zomato folder, which is a Zomato database that will hold all the tables associated with that company. And these are known as the tables in a database. And all these tables are related to each other with a relationship. And this is known as your relational database management system. Now, if someone has to access this, let's say this person is the data analyst working with Zomato, and this person wanted to access this table and do the analysis. So this person will be using his laptop or his or her laptop, and this person will install a software in this laptop known as client. Now this client will allow this particular data analyst to connect with this particular database or any database using the ID and the password. So this particular person, data analyst, has to enter his username and password to connect with the tables or the database, and this is all done over the network or over the internet. So now all the data is centralized, located in this particular server. So this is known as a server. This entire thing is known as a server. And a person who wants to access this data can now simply use this software, which is client, install it on his laptop, enter the username, password, and the host name and every other detail, and will be able to connect to the database and can now access the tables, can now access the content of these tables over the internet. Now, if this person asks a question, let's say, um, how many orders in last 24 hours? If this is a question that this person wanted to get from the table, there is a requirement to write this question in some language. Yes or no, everyone? I cannot simply ask this question literally as a human language, right? Since this is our system, this is a machine system, there should be some language in which I can talk to this system, right? So if we want to talk to this system, holding our data, we need some language. And that is where the language comes into picture, which is SQL. So this person will be writing this question on this client using SQL language, and that SQL language is something that can be understood by your RDBMS system, and it will be able to get you the answer. Now the advantage is that since this particular server comes with both the data and the processing power, so when I give this question in the form of SQL to this particular RDBMS, since it has both the data as well as the processing power, it will be able to resolve this question or process this question and will only return me the answer. The answer. So what you send is a query, a question, Q, and what you get is the answer. And since the RDBMS is running over server which has processing power and the data, this can execute the query to return just the answer. So now this data analyst does not have to fetch the data and process it in their laptop. They don't need to fetch the data. All they need to do is write their question using SQL as a language, send it to the RDBMS. Since RDBMS is running on the server and server has both processing power and the data, it will be able to process your question and will send you the answer in your client interface. So this is your entire process. Is everyone clear with this? What is client and what is server? Now, how the data is entering into these tables, who is putting the data? So let's understand the data input process. Now, RDBMS is something that has to be installed in this server. So once you install RDBMS in the server, you will be required to create these folders and the database and the table. So it will be like a blank computer. It will be like a blank computer. You are required to create the database as well as the tables. And who is going to do this? This creation process is always done by data engineers. So data engineers will take the responsibility to install the RDBMS on the server, because RDBMS is a software. So they will install the RDBMS on the server. They will create all these folders, which are known as database, and they will also create the table. So let's say they have created the database and the table also. But how this table will get the data into it? How these records will come into picture? Am I going to upload them, or are they going to come from somewhere? So the records are going to come from the front end. So there is something known as a front end and there is the database. Now, what is the front end of Zomato? What is the front end of Zomato? Zomato application, right? Which you guys are using. That is the front end. That is something which is accessible to all of you. This is the Zomato application. Zomato app. Right? Now, if you as a user is doing some activity on this Zomato app, let's say you are placing the order, then this will trigger a response. This will trigger an event. This will trigger an event which will go to your RDBMS, which is the database, and then it will direct your event to the respective table. Let's say the orders table. So when an action is done, is made by the user on the front end, it triggers an event that enables the RDBMS to preserve the data in the respective table within the database. So what do you understand by this? This basically means that once I have created these tables, which are empty as of now, I will connect these tables with my front end, which is the mobile application. Now, whenever I place the order using my mobile, this will trigger an event and that will send the data to the RDBMS, which RDBMS will store in the table, which is orders table. So that is how your data will populate in all these tables. It is not going to happen by uploading the data manually. It is going to happen as the trigger happens in your front end. So this is your full stack, what is known as full stack, that you are looking at a front end as well as the back end, and RDBMS is like a back end. Clear everyone how this data will come?